The Christianization of the Hungarians was one of the most decisive transformations in medieval Europe. Emerging from the vast Eurasian steppes, the Magyars, ancestors of the modern Hungarians, settled in the Carpathian Basin around the end of the 9th century. At that time, they were a pagan people whose religion combined shamanistic practices, animism, and ancestor worship. The Taltos, their shamans, acted as spiritual guides, healers, and prophets, mediating between humans and the world of spirits. They revered natural forces, practiced animal sacrifices, and buried their dead with weapons and goods, believing that the warrior life continued beyond death. This religious outlook reflected the Magyars' martial culture, for in the 10th century their raids reached across Europe, making them one of the most formidable military forces of their age. The Magyars' cavalry was fast, disciplined, and devastating in battle. Their use of mounted archery, honed during centuries of nomadic life, gave them a tactical edge that confounded many European armies. Between the late 9th and mid-10th centuries, Hungarian warbands struck fear across the continent. They raided deep into Italy, reaching as far as Rome and into the German duchies, Burgundy, and even the Pyrenees. Monasteries and towns, unprepared for the swiftness of their attacks, were plundered and burned. Chroniclers of the time described them as a scourge, instruments of divine punishment upon Christendom, so dreaded that their very name became synonymous with destruction. Yet this reliance on raiding for wealth and prestige also meant that the Hungarians were constantly in conflict with their neighbors and remained outsiders in the increasingly Christianized landscape of Europe. The Hungarians were not entirely cut off from Christianity, however. Living between Byzantium in the east and the Latin West, they encountered missionaries from both traditions. Some Magyar leaders accepted baptism in the mid-10th century, often for political or diplomatic advantage rather than genuine conversion. For instance, Gyula of Transylvania was baptized in Constantinople, and other members of the ruling elite also received Christian instruction. Yet these early conversions remained limited, and pagan traditions persisted as the dominant framework of Hungarian society. By the mid-10th century, political necessity began to press the Hungarians toward change. Their crushing defeat at the Battle of Lechfeld in 955, where Otto I of the Holy Roman Empire decisively broke a major Hungarian raiding force, ended the era of wide-ranging plunder. It was clear that the tactics that had terrorized Europe for decades were no longer enough against increasingly organized Christian armies. Forced to abandon the nomadic raiding economy, the Magyars settled more permanently in the Carpathian Basin, adopting agriculture and local trade. Surrounded by Christian powers, the Holy Roman Empire, Bohemia, Poland, and Byzantium, they faced the risk of permanent hostility if they remained outside the Christian order. Conversion offered more than spiritual renewal. It was a gateway to legitimacy, alliances, and survival in the medieval European world. It was under Prince Géza, who ruled from 972 to 997, that the first real steps toward systematic Christianization were taken. Geza recognized the necessity of alignment with the Christian West and invited missionaries from Bavaria into Hungary. He himself accepted baptism, though contemporary chronicles note that he continued to tolerate and perhaps even practice pagan rites. One report relates that when reproached for this, he remarked that he was powerful and wealthy enough to honor many gods, a telling glimpse of his pragmatic approach to religion. Yet despite his ambivalence, Geza laid the essential foundations for Hungary's Christian future. His son Vike, later known as Stephen I, married Gisela of Bavaria, thereby forging ties with one of the most influential noble houses of the Holy Roman Empire. Through these actions, Geza placed Hungary firmly within the orbit of Latin Christianity. Stephen I succeeded his father in 997. Baptized as a child, Stephen was deeply committed to Christianity, but he faced immediate opposition. According to Hungarian tradition, succession should have passed to his kinsman Kopan, who represented the pagan nobility. The conflict between Stephen and Kopan became a clash of worldviews, the old pagan customs against the Christian monarchy Stephen envisioned. With the support of German knights and the legitimacy of his marriage alliance, Stephen defeated Kopan in battle, thereby establishing his rule and ensuring the ascendancy of Christianity in Hungary. When Stephen I was crowned around the year 1000, the crown came from Pope Sylvester II, not the Holy Roman Emperor. This crucial act marked Hungary as a sovereign Christian kingdom under papal recognition, rather than as a vassal of the empire. Though Hungary maintained close ties with the empire through Stephen's marriage to Géza of Bavaria and the presence of Bavarian clergy, it remained politically independent. Unlike Bohemia, which became a vassal state within the empire, Hungary stood as an equal Christian monarchy. Stephen brought Benedictine monks to Hungary, encouraged the construction of churches and monasteries, and passed laws mandating baptism, church attendance, and the observance of Christian holy days. Pagan customs, including traditional marriage rites and sacrifices, were outlawed, and resistance was met with force as Stephen crushed revolts by nobles determined to preserve the old ways. The transformation, however, was far from easy. Pagan uprisings continued throughout the 11th century, as many rural communities clung stubbornly to ancestral traditions. Yet over time, the practical advantages of Christianity, diplomatic recognition, political stability, and cultural progress began to prevail. Parish churches spread across the countryside, gradually reshaping daily life, while new dynastic ties bound Hungary ever more closely to the Christian world. Hungary's integration into Latin Christendom was further demonstrated through its participation in the Crusades. As a Christian kingdom situated along the main routes to the Holy Land, Hungary became both a staging ground and an active participant in these great religious wars. During the First Crusade in 1096, Hungarian King Koloman allowed various crusading armies to pass through his lands, though not without difficulty, as some groups caused unrest. Later, Hungarian rulers took part directly. King Andrew II led a large contingent during the Fifth Crusade, marching to the Holy Land with one of the largest crusading armies of the time, estimated at tens of thousands of men. While his campaign was ultimately short-lived, Hungary's contribution showed its deep involvement in the affairs of Christendom. Participation in the Crusades reinforced Hungary's status as a pillar of the Catholic world, linking the legacy of its conversion under Stephen I with the wider defense and expansion of the Christian faith in medieval Europe. The Christianization of the Hungarians was thus a gradual process, shaped by political necessity, dynastic ambition, and the determined leadership of Prince Geza and King Stephen I. It transformed a pagan warrior people whose raids had once terrified the continent into a Christian monarchy and secured Hungary's place in the European order. What began as a pragmatic adaptation to the realities of the time became a defining aspect of Hungarian identity, one that ensured the kingdom would endure as a bridge between East and West, rooted firmly in the traditions of Latin Christendom. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out my other content on theology and Christian history. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.